Good afternoon, and welcome to today's panel discussion on MI2 metals, innovation, and recycling. I'm Louanna Aldridge. I'll be your moderator for this session. Whether you're a policymaker, a business leader, an educator, or an environmentally conscious citizen, we're glad that you're here today. Recycling is often seen as a simple, everyday act, but behind it lies a complex system of science, economics, infrastructure, and human behavior. Today, we're bringing together experts in the field of recycling, environmental science, waste management, public policy, and metals innovation to explore where recycling stands today, what's working, what's not, and where we go from here. We'll be diving into tough questions. How can we reduce contamination in recycling streams? What role does policy play in driving change? And how do we engage communities in meaningful, sustainable ways? So let's get started. I'd like to introduce our panelists and let them talk about how they're involved in the recycling industry. I'll start with Mike Buckentin, CEO of Metals Innovation Initiative, MI2, based out of Bowling Green with a mission of promoting Kentucky as a destination for innovation in the metals industry. Mike?
Thanks, Louanna, and thanks for the opportunity to be part of the conference today. Really appreciate it. So, as Louanna said, Metals Innovation Initiative, it's a public-private partnership. We won't talk a lot about MI2 today. It's just kind of a way to sort of lay the foundation for the topic of recycling and how important it is. So, I'm just going to run through a couple slides and then we'll get into some dialogue. First of all, just metals. What is metals? Of course, everybody knows metals, but metals are all around you. Metals is steel, it's stainless steel, it's aluminum, it's copper, and then you get a lot of maybe less known metals like for instance, tungsten would be a metal too. They're in everything. They're in everything from automotive to appliances, cell phones, watches, cables. One of the interesting applications of metals that's very, very important to some of the topics of this conference is in the energy field is aluminum is typically, in other metals, they're typically part of distribution cable lines. So when you start getting into that, you realize how important they are to just even national security. Metals are located in really every region of Kentucky. There's some type of metals production, metals usage, fabrication. They're really all over the entire state. And we think we're lined up pretty well with the federal administration's sort of goal and alignment and direction on just manufacturing in general, which metals is. As I said, that's just a map of the Commonwealth, and what you can see is that whether it's fabricated or primary metals, just two different classifications, we're typically throughout the entire Commonwealth in one way or another. The darker areas are the more concentrated areas with more, and then the lighter areas would be not quite so many businesses. MI2, as I said, it's a public-private partnership. The metals industry got together a few years ago, Cabinet of Economic Development, Secretary Noel, and really it's just an agreement between the state and the metals industry on how we can work together, identify what are our challenges, identify what we need to grow, how we might work with the state more as a way to do that. Just really quick, some of the members of the MI2, and you'll probably recognize a lot of them, but they're not just the producers, but they're also the suppliers to the metals industry as well as customers as well. And is that my last one, I think? Oh, wait, I do have two more. And this really, I believe, sets the foundation and the stage for what we want to talk about. I mean, we're going to talk a lot about metals, but we do want to include, other materials as well in terms of recycling, because whether it's metals or cardboard or plastic or styrofoam, we were talking about that earlier. Really, the goal is to try to keep valuable, important materials out of landfills, going to the processes that we need them to be involved in so they can continue to be recycled and use, so that there aren't other materials that we would have to find and use. I really have just two slides that I wanted to show this morning. And when we get into the topics that we are very involved in terms of a business model, the business model of metals used to be primarily mining materials out of the ground and then using that material to produce a final product. Quite a while ago now, probably 50, 60 years ago, we started looking at how to recycle rather than to get new material out of the ground. Many of you are going to be familiar with this. The industry in general, whether it's steel, aluminum, doesn't matter, copper, what kind of material it is, it's largely based on recycling of the product that you make. So you make a product, it's used, and then you find it again in order to put it right back into your process again. If you're not recycling and closing that loop, then you begin to just not have enough raw materials. The reason that we do that is because recycling from an environmental point of view and a cost point of view is much, much better than bringing the materials out of the ground. Both in steel, which is the first one, and aluminum in this one, the point I wanted to bring up is that China is massively investing in recycling facilities and capabilities. And so when we all realize that it's a world stage and a global market, what you're going to see over the next years is the raw materials are going to become short supply. And so what we need to do, not just in Kentucky but everywhere, is to make sure that we're using our materials and recycling them so that they will increase the supply of the raw materials that we need for all of our processes these days. Okay? And I think that's it. I had one other one there, but we can go on.
Thank you, Mike. Tyler Schroeder, Corporate Recycling Sales Manager for Rumpke Waste and Recycling, where he oversees Rumpke's recycling efforts across Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio.
Yeah, thanks, Louanna. So as you mentioned, Rumpke, so we're the largest family-owned waste and recycling company in the U.S., which we're super proud of. We have 16 recycling facilities and 16 landfills across Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. And my main role is to oversee the team that's responsible for procuring material from mainly businesses, but we do work with our municipal team as well, and trying to engage the public and drive single-stream recycling to our MRFs in Cincinnati and Columbus.
Thank you, Tyler. Brian Osterman, Director of the Division of Waste Management, where he heads the government recycling program for the state of Kentucky.
Good morning, Louanna. So we've talked a lot this morning, but yeah, I'll just talk a little bit about what our program does, kind of more on the county side, local government side of things, where we do administer grants through our Recycling Local Assistance Branch to help counties in their recycling efforts. We do that through various different funds that we got, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, that's kind of where we get involved. And if you don't see them around, there's some recycling bins around as well. Our Kentucky Government Recycling Program is taking care of that, so be sure you recycle while you're here. So,
thank you, Brian. Nick Kronsbein, Vice President of Schupan Recycling, a family-owned business headquartered in Kalamazoo, Michigan, as well as Vice President and General Manager of UBCR LLC, a collaborative logistics venture with Tomra in North America.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for having me. Schupan, we're a 57-year-old family-owned business. We work in the aluminum and recycled metal supply chain. We have industrial and electronics recycling services, aluminum and plastic distribution and fabrication. We're also a global trader in ferrous and non-ferrous metals around the world. Supply a lot of material into the Logan and Trios aluminum in Kentucky here. And we also have a building, a facility that cleans dirty aluminum from MRFs that can't get it clean enough to supply into mills. And I work in the Michigan and more beverage deposit container sites, both in Michigan and Iowa. And we also run a MRF like Rumpke and Waste Management too. So we make sure a lot of these beverage containers get right back into beverage containers. So.
I think you said that, but municipal recycling facility, MRF. Okay. I'll now guide us through a couple of questions just to explore these ideals further, and after that we'll open it up to the audience. So if you guys hear something, jot down your thoughts here and present them to the questions. Let's begin. We'll go down the row, and Mike, we'll start with you. What are the most pressing challenges currently facing the recycling industry?
I think, which is a part of what we're doing today, is a lot of education. Just what is recycling? I think a lot of times when somebody hears recycling, they don't think of it as a sort of a business model topic. Think of it as an environmental issue, which it is. It absolutely is. Landfill issue, absolutely is. But it's becoming, as I said, over the years, it's something that is a business metric, a business variable that businesses now, in order for them to survive and succeed, businesses need recycling. So it's over the years, it's went from something that's almost a nice to do, and we want to do it, we want to find ways to do it, to something that the metals industry in general, and I'll just say that many times, we're absolutely dependent upon recycling. Metals are infinitely recyclable typically, okay? And one of the best examples is going to be a beverage can that we can talk about. On one hand, you have, say, an automobile, right? When an automobile reaches end of life, it's not like you go throw it away in your trash can, right? There's ways to get rid of an automobile, and it gets back into the supply chain in general pretty well. Beverage cans, other end of the spectrum. Beverage cans are one of the most difficult metals to recycle. We all use them. Question is, do we all put them in the right container? Do they get right back into the closed loop cycle again? In Kentucky, not so much. In the US, not so much. There are countries that do very good. There's some countries that have 80-90% or more recycling of beverage cans. And as I said, when you realize that that is a very, very important component of the raw materials for the aluminum industry and beverage cans, we need to find something to do about it. We absolutely do.
Tyler?
Yeah, absolutely. So biggest thing for us at Rumpke, some of the things that we're trying to tackle every single day is just public trust when it comes to recycling. We get questions all the time. Is this really recycled, right? Can you really recycle this? And at Rumpke, regardless of what the commodity markets are doing, our goal is to make sure that anything that we have on our acceptables list is indeed recycled. We also try, as Nick mentioned, try arrows. We work with Schupan to market our UBCs that we collect, both in Indiana, Ohio, and also in Kentucky. So it's a good story because we're able to get that recycled back at a local end user. But participation rates are another big thing with the public, trying to get people to recycle in places that have access, and then access as a whole in communities that don't have programs currently. Rumpke is always trying to expand and find new ways to grant access to communities that are underserved when it comes to recycling. Another thing that was briefly touched on with the lithium-ion batteries, contamination in general, making sure that the curbs that are, or the cans that are set out at the curb that our drivers are picking up, the material that's in there can flow safely through our facility. Just in Cincinnati alone, we have 15 to 20 battery fires a month stemming from lithium-ion batteries. So that's a big concern for us.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yes.
Brian?
So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the states and the county governments in terms of recycling, some of the challenges they have. Mainly it's the funding to establish those recycling programs in those rural counties. That's one of the biggest things we see that is difficult for these counties. In addition to that, just the participation of the counties in curbside recycling and drop-off centers. Especially in your rural areas, it might not be as convenient to go take your recycling to a drop-off center if there's not curbside recycling. So that comes down to funding, staffing of your local governments, your city governments, Usually times, those people have multiple jobs in those counties, whether it be the dog catcher, the sheriff, and the recycling coordinator, solid waste coordinator. They're spread pretty thin, and so that's kind of where, we see some of those issues. And then Mike talked about awareness and education, just getting the word out. What to recycle, what not to recycle. Getting that word out is very difficult. So.
Thank you, Brian. Nick?
I'll make mine pretty short. Education, participation, and convenience. Those are the three things that you need for more recycling. So.
Yeah, thank you. I think that kept there seemed to be a
It's a
theme there.
theme,
Which helps.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, Tyler, let's start with you. What metals are currently under recycling and why?
So I'll piggyback right off of Mike on the UBCs, which is used beverage containers. Overall, only 15% of UBCs that are consumed in the state of Kentucky are actually captured back into the recycling stream. And overall, Kentucky's recycling rate is only 15%. So the biggest thing that my team tries to do on a daily basis is preserve landfill airspace and try to divert as much material as possible. And again, as Mike touched on, making sure that we capture the low-hanging fruit. UBCs are infinitely recyclable. It's just a matter of getting the message out there that we need to do it, and to everyone else's point here, making sure that there's access available. So whether it's county-wide drop-offs or just getting it into the bin every week.
Nick?
I would have to say aluminum in Michigan and Iowa have a little bit better with container deposit laws, but even if we're at 80% in Michigan, we used to be 95 to 99%, so aluminum.
Wow. Mike, you have anything to add to that?
I just want to keep trying to emphasize the importance of it. So, on one hand, should you ever throw something of value into a landfill? Right? That's a question. Should you throw something of value into a landfill? Hopefully everybody thinks you should not. So then the question becomes, has been already brought up in this discussion, is how do you set up the process and the convenience with the public in general in order to not do that, right? Some countries are farther ahead. Some states in the U.S. are farther ahead. We've really got to focus on the recycling rates in areas where they are very low. And you just think about this, again, raw materials being an amount of material, right? We need more of those raw materials than we did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We're going to need more 5 years from now. Well, what happens if you're not putting more into that supply chain amount that's out there? Again, it's a global economy without any question, with 100% certainty, with all of the recycling facilities that are being built now throughout the world, there will come a shortage of those raw materials. Why is that important? There's 36,000 Kentuckians that work directly in the metals industry. That's just in Kentucky. When it comes to all the contractors, the suppliers, the customers that depend on the metals industry, there's over 100,000 Kentuckians that are dependent upon, in one way or another, the metals industry. So it is about jobs, it is about businesses, it's about economic development.
Stemming from that, what innovations or emerging technologies are showing the most promise in improving the efficiency or effectiveness of those metal recycling? That's for you, Mike.
I think Tyler and Nick probably are better to talk about this, but so a lot of the collection that's done is what's called mixed recyclables, right? So you've got, some of us are familiar with it. Not only the cans, but you've also got cardboard, paper, plastic, whatever you put in there. So then it becomes, when you take those and you logistically get them to a facility, then it's like, how well do you sort that out and make sure that all of those materials then go to where they belong? That might sound simple, it might sound vague. If you've ever seen anything like that, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And sometimes those mixed recyclables are not all that clean. There's a lot of other things that are put in there that shouldn't be put in there, which makes it harder. So it's really just how to do that. It's a costly process to get them clean. There's a lot of work going into how to do that better at a lower cost so that we can make sure that that feeds that supply chain.
Yeah, so I would say for Rumpke, AI is our biggest tool and kind of the thing that we're really using to drive digging deeper into the waste streams at our MRFs. So last year we opened a $100 million facility in Columbus, and we're partnered with Ohio State and actually have classrooms in the MRF and allow students to come in and kind of see the process as far as how it goes from the truck to the tipping floor and then through our systems. But specifically on metals, I mean, eddy currents allow for, I hesitate to say 100%, but 99% of all UBCs that run through our facility are able to be recaptured, which is awesome. But yeah, AI, and then we actually use x-rays now as well. We're getting away from some of the robots and going more to x-rays. So we use AI to power the x-ray, and we're able to really identify as the waste stream kind of moves through the conveyors by shape, size, and color. And that allows us, as Mike mentioned, it's not always just metals or about finding the UBCs. There's plastics, there's cardboard, there's office paper. A lot of things that are put into the waste stream are recyclable. It's just a matter of educating the public on what's not. And AI is helping us on the back end fix some of those mistakes.
Well, that kind of leads into our next question. Nick, I'll let you take this one. How is AI or automation being integrated into the metal recycling process?
Well, we have put it in our Michigan operation where we actually select commodities. So a lot of the commodities coming through our system are pretty easy. It's glass, plastic, or aluminum. And we actually have a camera that selects a commodity and sends it down the right line. It's pretty simple. And it's a lot easier than operating a MRF where you have all different material types.
I just wanted to add one more thing when we're talking about it. We may talk about it later, but Brian ended up connecting me to somebody that was part of the, I think she's oversees all of the Lexington school district's recycling programs. And I had a really good conversation with her about the work they do and how they're trying to get recycling rates up in the school district, school areas of Lexington. But she said this, she said, you know, a lot of times, even though we educate and promote and we talk about how to throw things away, she goes, it's very, very common for somebody to put the wrong material in the recycling bins. And she says sometimes it happens so much that, and Nick and Tyler could talk more about this, but they have to have a certain amount of cleanliness in the mixed recyclables. And if they don't, she said a lot of times you don't get enough in there, so they just throw them into the other waste and it goes into the landfill. So I mean, we just need to think about that, right? We've setting up the process to throw things away in the right containers. We still don't have the habits formed and the discipline. And a lot of times what happens is all of that material ends up in the landfill anyway. I mean, that, again, those are the kind of things that we really need to work on.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that, Mike. So another way we're using AI at Rumpke is we have a system called Netrodyne, which is a series of cameras powered by AI installed in all of our trucks. And we're able to use that, and it's looking for certain things. And as the arm is dumping it into the back of the truck, it'll pick up and alert the driver proactively and say, hey, we see some things that look, not to spec here. And that allows us to kind of get on the front end of what Mike's talking about to try to help preserve the load integrity and make sure that, the routes that we're picking up are recyclable. So when it makes it to its final destination, it's a viable product. It's able to be sorted. So using that system, we've been able to identify and audit over 350 routes within the Rumpke footprint and go to those customers that are habitually putting materials in there that are not recyclable or not on our acceptables list at the MRFs and ask them, hey, can we clean this up? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, to Mike's point, then, unfortunately it breaks my heart, but, we got to pull the recycling bin and they're just sending everything to landfill. So trying to use technology to at least engage customers and drive participation rates up.
Nick, can you speak to the challenges around recycling things like electronic waste?
Yes, yeah, electronic waste, we have a unit that does that, light rebuilds to shredding circuit boards, things like that. Some of the challenges over the years have been, like mentioned earlier, lithium batteries. It's very labor intensive to remove some of the internal batteries that are on circuit boards. And then the commodity prices of precious metals, obviously, to offset that labor cost is very volatile. I know gold has been up 30% in the last couple months, which has helped, but less precious metals have been used throughout creation of circuit boards. So.
We're done.
I like that better because I can see you and you can only just see me.
I like it.
Okay.
Dang it.
Mike, how does metal recycling compare to primary metal extraction in terms of environmental footprint?
So I'd bring up two things. Certainly the environmental footprint, bringing materials out of the ground and going through a smelting process produces a lot more air emissions. Honestly, a lot more air emissions. And a lot of those air emissions, the treatment for that, very, very costly again. You have to collect them and you have to treat them, right? There's a lot of components that are hazardous. It's very, very expensive. And of course, correctly so, from an EPA point of view, you can't not put in all of those treatment centers for all of those air emissions that come out. So from an environmental footprint, I mean, it's not even comparable. I mean, 100 to 1 or more in terms of the comparison for recycling, which produces very, very little to a primary process. But the other thing I would bring up too is the cost part of it. Again, I had it one of my slides. Just in general, if you take metals out of the ground and produce a product, it's 10 times more costly than it would be if you recycled. So, and how to kind of bring that home, I was thinking about that during the first session. One of the biggest components and the biggest costs for the primary process is the energy needed to convert from ores out of the ground to that product. Energy is 10 to 1 or more. So when you think about the conversations that kind of started off everything this morning in terms of energy, all of the concern around data centers and everything, what we can do as a metals industry, very, very big users of energy, what we can do is look at our processes and say, how can we minimize the energy that we're going to need to use? And that's to do as much recycling as we possibly can. It's extremely important from not just an environmental point of view, but also energy and cost as well.
On that note, are there specific practices or technologies that could significantly reduce air emissions or energy consumption in the recycling process?
I think that the way I would say that is for the main production processes, we're always looking to improve and fine tune. There still is a lot of waste heat, I guess I would call it, because we still need to, say, melt a product to turn it into another final product. So there's still a lot of energy used, not near as much as the primary process, of course, but there's still a lot of energy used. And one of the main, I guess, focuses is to try to reuse. So right now you heat it up and it goes big stacks, and we collect all the air emissions, but we don't necessarily do a good job of collecting the off gases from a heat point of view. So I would say that's been a focus. It's probably going to need to be a much bigger focus when you look at energy demands, consumption, and pricing going into the future.
Nick, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would have to say our the system that's set up in at least in the Michigan market and some of the other markets of it's pickup and processing, how you can move material with the least amount of emissions. And I know there's other systems in the U.S. that operate differently. We use about 1/5 of what some of the other systems have set up. So we're very proud of that. Less trucks on the road, less road damage, less fuel used. So,
Brian, let's go to you. How can metal recycling contribute to environmental goals and sustainability targets?
So I'm going to piggyback off a little bit what Mike and Tyler said about the energy consumption. So, we really need to focus on that raw materials part of things. To Mike's point, 74% less energy use for ferrous metals, and it's roughly 5% from what I understand, non-ferrous metals, aluminum. So reducing that reliance on, also on the global markets for this material, this new recycled materials. Another thing Tyler talked about, less materials in landfills. So about 32%, I believe, of what can be recycled is actually being recycled. So 64% of that is going into the landfills. We know that landfill capacity is shrinking, and there's not too many new landfills going into the state, and in many states. It's just not something that's really looked at anymore. So we really need to think about how we can reduce that amount of recyclables going into landfills in the future, and we really need to research other, technologies that are going to be here in the future for that.
Well, we know you run the government recycling program, recycle a lot of paper around the state of Kentucky. I think we're hitting our 100 million pound
Getting close to it.
mark. What's the biggest contaminants in paper recycling, and how can we minimize those?
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about what government recycling. So if you don't know, it's actually in our statute that we have to have a government recycling section. And what it does is it said that that state agencies have to have some kind of source separation and collection program, so a recycling program. So we service over 100 agencies in Frankfurt on that, and we do go out to some of our surrounding counties, Louisville, Lexington, and pick up some of that paper as well. So we mainly focus on paper goods and cardboard. Some of the things we see, obviously, is metals, paper clips, microfiche, CDs. A lot of that stuff. I don't see many CDs anymore, so maybe they'll be gone here before long. But then one of the big things we do focus on is you get a better commodity price for your white paper versus your colored paper, and it's very, it's easy for that to get commingled together, and so it takes a lot of our staff's time to try to get that separated out. We do have different bins for that in our state agency offices, so that helps. But it comes back to the making sure that everybody has that good habit of separating it out and getting to the right bin. Cardboard, he's talked about styrofoam. That's one of the big contaminants in cardboard is styrofoam, and then packaging products, food is one too as well. So, and not just thinking in industry, it's just all those things, and then you've got other waxes, petroleum products that may contaminate the system. So that's some of the big contaminants that we see going forward.
Nick, do you want to talk about any of the contaminants that you see? I know you
yeah.
several recycling streams.
Yeah, there's a little different, two different types of recycling as far as with the streams of material. Paper kind of one side, and then beverage containers, which we normally see. It's a good mix of, at least in the Michigan and Iowa markets, of the container deposit keeps the glass out of the recycling bin for the most part, with beer and some wine containers in Iowa and things like that. So that usually breaks in a truck, contaminates a lot of other materials. So the hundreds of tons that are taken out of the curbside definitely help the paper side for less contaminants.
Mike, what role does the metal recycling industry, I know you hit on this just a little bit earlier, but what do they play in job creation? What role do they play?
So I guess the statistics I brought up earlier, part of just forming MI2 was looking at what is the metals industry in Kentucky, right? If you look at metals industry just in general across the U.S., Kentucky has actually one of the most progressive growing parts of the metals industry as anywhere else in the U.S. So very good thing. There's a lot of things that go into that. We're an aluminum center, lots of automotive in Kentucky. Just in general, it's a business-friendly state to do business in. It really is. I've worked in a lot of states throughout the U.S., and I'll say this, Kentucky's one of the best places to do business of any other place that I've worked in. And I think that leads to it, right? There's been a lot of investment. The jobs in the metals industry has been trending positive over the last decade or so, at least. And I think we have a very good future. What drives that, everything again from, you look at automotive and EVs. EVs use a lot of light metals, so okay, aluminum is part of that, right? Specialty metals, as I brought up earlier, metals like tungsten and copper really go into construction and other forms of usages. But it's really a good place to do business and all of that. Again, tying it back to recycling, we're going to have to find ways, we've talked about it this morning, to develop the infrastructure and the logistics to get the metals from where they're being used to where they need to go. That's not just going to happen by magic, or it's not going to happen without somebody doing something. So I would say that part of the metals industry, the supply chain, is going to have to be developed, and there will be roles and there will be jobs created in order to do that. There will have to be.
Brian, are the current pricing mechanisms supportive of long-term investment in recycling infrastructure?
So I'll talk a little bit about just kind of what, some of the things that it comes to in the state. Commodity prices for recyclables such as paper and plastic, they are a variable commodity. The pricing goes up and down. It can create market stability, instability, I should say, not stability. So we've helped a little bit on that, especially in our counties, by offering tax credits and grant programs so that they can buy the types of equipment they need for dealing with these recyclables in their counties. So hopefully down the road, as they get this, they use this grant money to buy that equipment they need, or the bins they need, or anything like that to collect it, that as the metals market grows in those areas, in those rural areas, they'll have some of that infrastructure in place to where they don't have a big cost up front. They'll have had some of that cost absorbed in the interim, or in the first part of it, and then that gets them on a good start to going forward.
Okay. Mike or Brian, do you want to talk about what policies or regulation have been the most effective to promote recycling?
It's out there and you can have your viewpoint about it. The states that do best have what's called deposit legislation, right? And there's various ways to do that. But deposit legislation essentially is you pay extra to get your 6-pack or whatever you buy, and then you want that back, right? So to get it back, you go take that back to wherever the collection centers are. And the states that do that have high rates. I don't know that there's been a new state that's done that for a while. A lot of those programs are more dated. Probably Tyler and Nick can help us out on that. New states are starting to look at how can we essentially, instead of just mandating a deposit, how can states set up a business model to get the material, that resource collected, right? And so that's more in line with what we're working on. Texas is working on a program like that. States are working on programs like that. Again, I don't know if anything's to the point where it's sort of kicking off statewide or anything. I'm hoping that Kentucky can be at the forefront of that and we can figure out our business model. We've spent a lot of time in Frankfurt talking about it. We've started to talk with the school system. I think that's probably one of the best places to start it. Get it into the education system. You form those habits from the beginning. Then as they become adults and they go out into the workforce and society, they have those habits built up because we've already worked with them to do that. But you got to get the logistics set up too. And industry needs to be heavily involved in that. We need the material. We've got to figure out how to fund a lot of that. We do certainly hope that we can partner with Brian and Secretary Goodman and others to look at how we can set up those programs, right? Between the private industry and the state as well. And so I'll get Tyler and Nick certainly their viewpoint on that.
You want me to go first, Tyler?
Yeah, go ahead.
I work in obviously a couple states for deposit legislation, but know a lot of the 10 states in the U.S. that have it. What has been happening over the last probably 10 years or so, like Oregon, they had a modernization to theirs. Connecticut also to their bottle deposit legislation to cover more containers, change deposit value, add convenience for consumers. Obviously, if somebody spends money on something, they want to be able to get it back easily. Those are two states that have made changes over the years and have seen very positive results. Oregon, I think, was, and don't quote me, but 60% redemption rate when it was at 5 cents. Now they're at 88 to 90% when it's 10 cents. Connecticut also had a change for having reverse vending machines where you take your containers back and you can put the containers through machines to get your money back. They had legislation to mandate those machines be put in retail locations that sold deposit containers and made it convenient for consumers to get it back. And they went from probably mid-50s to 60s up to 88% even in the first half of this year. And that was more in the last 2 years. They've modified their law to make those changes and have seen great results.
How can local, oh, sorry, Brian, did you want to add something?
Well, I'll just talk a little bit about what the cabinet's doing and in terms of policies and regulations. So we have two big things that we do. We do give out a lot of grants. And they're funded by two different types of funds. You've probably all heard of the Kentucky Pride Fund that was established back in 2022. It's $1.75 on every ton of trash that's put in a landfill in the state. Those funds come back and to promote different types of recycling and for your counties. So we use that money to actually administer grants to the counties for purchase of recycling equipment. I think last year we gave out $3.8 million in recycling grants for that. In addition to that, it has a hazardous waste component, household hazardous waste component to that, as well as composting. So you see a trend here, reducing that amount that's going into landfills as much as possible through recycling and composting and removing the hazardous waste part of that out as well. And then we have our Waste Tire Trust Fund. That's a little bit on the, that's more of a different fund. It was done in 1988. Funds from that, from a sale of a new tire, goes into a fund, and we use that to get tires, out of the environment. We have waste tire collection events across the state every 3 years in different area development districts. The counties also get direct grants for those every year for tire removal in those counties. And then we also have a component that they get grants for removal of those tires, but they also get grants to take those end-use products of those tires and put them back out in the community. So if you've ever seen the ADA compliant playgrounds across the state, they use rubber epoxy like on those. We do walking trails with rubber modified asphalt is used in counties as well for some of the road projects. So it's just different types of uses for that. So we try to use our funds as much as we can to get the recycling really a head start and a push in those especially in those local and rural counties. Those rural counties is the ones that we have the most difficulties in.
That kind of answers this one a little bit, but how can local communities and consumers get more involved with recycling?
I can jump in. So I guess for me, it's making sure everyone understands the process from, what happens when you put a UBC or, any piece of metal into your curbside bin. What's that process look like to actually get it into the end product, right? We kind of talked earlier about consumer trust in general, and is this really getting recycled? So for us at Rumpke, we employ people at both Cincinnati and our Columbus MRFs where their full-time job is just giving tours, whether it's the public, whether it's students from Ohio State. Procter & Gamble's corporate headquarters is conveniently located down the street from our Cincinnati facility, so we're able to bring in groups that are focused on big push right now is toothpaste tubes, right? How do we get toothpaste tubes to be in a sustainable packaging to where our MRF can add that to our acceptable materials list and get that recycled consistently? So just building the trust and getting people to understand and see the process for themselves. So we're very big on transparency and allowing people to come through as often as they want and watch the process from start to finish.
We do a lot of education through community events. We do some recycling, so in capturing materials that rather than going through the waste stream, whether it's a golf LPGA events to I know the marathons, people shed clothing as they start running. We take all that clothing and get it to the right location. Various different materials, and then actually this year and a half ago we got a grant for more education on bottle deposit because people weren't taking back their containers and actually getting their refunds. So. And then also instituting some new technology to make it easier and more convenient for consumers to get their money back. So.
Okay. If you could implement one major change in the recycling ecosystem today, what would that be?
I mean, we'll probably all give a comment here, but I think the end sort of ultimate situation is in one way or another to have recycling start at the source, whatever the source is, okay? We've talked a lot about collection. How do you do that? Well, you try to maybe start up collection sites, which I'm not saying that's wrong, but curbside recycling or whatever you want to call that, getting that residential at the source process set up. Cardboard, think of how much is in that category these days. I mean, Amazon took that to a completely different level, right? All of the materials that come in that. And those of us who are more recycling minded, and we've become over time habitized to think that way. I mean, we really go through a lot of work. I mean, I probably go sometimes through too much work, but I try to make sure that everything possible. Tyler talked about toothpaste tubes. I mean, we've thought a lot about that. I look at them. Are they recyclable, right? And you really try to take that ownership to put the materials in the right containers. I might have one bag of trash a week and my recycle bin is filled up. And then like I'll look at my neighbor and their trash bin is overloaded with cardboard boxes, right? It doesn't make any sense. But I think it's that mindset that really has to be instilled at the source. Whatever the source is, you have to do the right thing there in order for this thing to have any chance about really working on a very broad, large scale.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off Mike's point. So obviously I mentioned the P&G example already, but really that's my team's main objective is going to businesses that are trying to push more PCR, post-consumer recycling into their packaging and trying to consult with them and help them, again, understand the process as a whole in terms of like a cardboard box, for example. You put that at the curb. It only takes 10 to 14 days for that to be made back into a new box. And some people hear that and think, You know, that's crazy, that's fast, right? Well, UBCs are the same way. Within 2 weeks, it's back into a new can. So to Mike's point earlier, what other creative thoughts or ideas can we put around the toothpaste tubes or boxes that different things come in? I know Amazon's got a big push right now for right-sizing the box for the thing you order, or just shipping it in the manufacturer's packaging and not necessarily an Amazon box. So starting at the source and working with the packaging companies and the guys that are producing packaging, and not only helping them drive more PCR into their products, but getting them to just not make that product at all, or divert away and maybe use a more right-sized container.
So I'll talk a little bit. I think one of the biggest things is education, and I think we've come a long way with education, especially to our younger generations. I've seen it time and time again that some of our older generation have that same mentality. Just it's the trash, throw it in the trash. But seeing that new generation saying, "Why did you do?" Actually asking the question, "Why did you do that? Why don't you put it in the recycling?" And so that motivates me. That actually, it's going to take a little bit more time, but I think eventually, hopefully, we get there with education. And I think Mike mentioned that education is a big. I think everybody here mentioned that education is a big thing, and so getting in with the schools is very important. And I think Tracine Loxton is the person at Lexington that has really been the forefront of that. But getting in those schools and just getting that education and how we can all get on the same page in terms of getting everybody informed on what they can and cannot do, and going that extra mile just to make sure that it gets in the right place so that we can have it for future generations.
Yep, and I'll piggyback. Education is big. I know around the U.S. there's been a lot of states with legislation for EPR for packaging or EPR laws. Those things are kind of coming around, and we hear more discussions in more states to get all the recycled, mostly packaging, back into the streams that can be used, because there is energy savings in just about everything from paper, glass, aluminum, huge energy savings in recycling to offset that cost for raw materials.
An EPR for our audience means?
Extended producer responsibility.
Thank you.
And-
Okay.
And I think, let me just
Go ahead.
like say that, I mean, this is Energy and Environmental Conference, right? So, I mean, I know everybody's made the connection by now because I've said it 100 times, but I mean, recycling is fundamental to both environmental and energy. It really is. And I can guarantee you that, so what's already started is there's already attempts that are being worked on right now to land materials, to mine materials out of landfills. Think about that. Craziest thing in the world, but I can guarantee you that that's going to be a business. I don't know how big a business that's going to be someday. I hope it's not going to be a big business. If it's a big business, that means we're probably all in trouble because we're out there mining all this stuff out of the landfill because we haven't done it right the first time. But that'll be very expensive, and it will result in a deterioration of the business model in some way or another. So the reason I bring that up is Environmental and Energy Conference. I would just challenge everybody today, taking away something from this panel discussion about what you do every day. Kentucky's, Tyler said, Kentucky only recycles 1.5 cans out of every 10 that we drink. So that means most of us are not throwing away in the right container all the time, every day. And I'm hopeful that this conversation will help spread the word a little bit and work on that rate.
Okay. I'd like to open it up to our audience because I've seen a lot of questions coming in for you guys. First question. What are the barriers to a container reimbursement law in Kentucky?
I mean, I guess I think that, again, I think most of the programs that were mandated in this way are older programs. Has any state done it recently? I don't think any state's done anything like that recently. So essentially the government goes out there and it's somewhere or another, we won't get into details, they said, every can that's sold in this state will have a deposit, right? And so they set that deposit. I just think that that's not the way states are going to go about it these days. I certainly don't see Kentucky going about it that way. I see a business model needing to get set up between waste companies like Rumpke and Schupan and the producers, aluminum producers, steel producers, aluminum producers. We've got to figure out the model we want to create, collection, logistics, how are we going to pay for it? And then I think we go to the state and we say, how can we do this together in some way? And I think Kentucky is open to that. We've just got a lot of work to do to come up with that business model.
Okay, here's a question for Tyler. I have Rumpke service, but there isn't recycling offered. What can I do as a citizen if I want to participate?
Yeah, it's a tough question. You know, we're always trying to expand, and the way that we do that is, you know, either through acquisitions or new facilities. And so we're very cognizant of the underserved areas, especially in rural or southern Kentucky. You know, as a company, we're trying to make investments to grant that access. But as we've talked about up here, just from a today's standpoint, really it's going to be the county drop-off facilities, or having to make that extra effort, unfortunately, you know, now as a consumer to bring your recycling to a facility, because we have not yet been able as an industry to bring recycling to you.
What are other countries doing that make their recycling programs successful? And could those things be used in the U.S., successful in the U.S.?
Well, I know, I guess I'll talk to that one. Yeah. In Europe, there's a single-use plastic directive in 2018, something like that, where they had to have recycled content in their plastic, whether packaging, whether it's 30% by 2025 and 50% by 2030. So they are definitely ahead of the curve on keeping plastics in the recycling stream. So.
Yeah, Germany, for example, you know, overarching government control in that sense is really looking at saying, you know, they audit every single bin as they go through their routes, and if somebody's put something in the wrong bin, they'll give you one warning, they'll tag it. After that, it's a pretty hefty fine, and after 3 times they pull that bin, and then you're paying 3 times as much to put what should be recycled in your trash bin. So the government's really forced their hands in the EU, which, you know, debatable on whether or not that works here, but it's something that's been proven to increase recyclability rates as a whole for their public.
Okay, here's one. Does Rumpke offer service for citizens to separate organic waste for composting purposes? If not, has that ever been considered?
Yeah, we don't. We partner with people. I'll give an example just for this area. It's called Smith Creek in Borden, Indiana. We'll partner with them. They'll compost. We do not operate any organics or composting facilities as of now, but you know, it's something we've looked into. It's just the logistics around it for us are tough. You know, the fear is always, because we operate on a single stream basis, telling people to put organics in that bin. It's not going to get captured at the MRF level, so it's got to be a separate process, and there's got to be enough route density to make it justifiable from a business standpoint.
Are there plans to establish a safer, more universal lithium battery recycling system?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
I would
Yeah.
hope so, because
Anyone?
the insurance rates are going through the roof.
Yeah, I was going to say
Tell
the
you
same
that.
thing.
I
Yeah.
mean, we see every day on the news garbage trucks catching fire,
Yeah.
and that's just a direct result of lithium batteries. Landfills catching fire as well. We've had landfills. Back to MAC emergency response. We get calls on them when landfills catch fire, and that's probably in direct correlation with lithium-ion batteries being disposed in the regular waste stream. I know that Northern Kentucky has a program, some sort of a program that they will take back some of those, Cincinnati area, Northern Kentucky. So that's something that we are looking at, because we really want to keep these lithium batteries out of the waste stream as much as possible. And Rumpke and I have talked about that.
Okay, that brings us to the end of today's panel on recycling and sustainability. On behalf of the Cabinet, I'd like to extend a sincere thank you to all my panelists. You guys have been incredible. Thank you for sharing your insights, experiences, and passion for creating a more sustainable future. To our audience, thank you all for being a part of this dialogue. I appreciate all the questions. We hope to leave you inspired and informed to make impactful choices in your communities and workplaces. Thank you again for being with us today, and I will turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Lefevre to take us into lunch.